we're going to cover the DataStax implementation methodology. KPI is a partner of DataStax and civil level partner. We'll also be at the Cassandra Summit. Hopefully all of you can join us there September 22nd through 24th. And KPI has done quite a few of the DataStax implementations in both in retail and financial service customers throughout the U.S. So here's an overview of the methodology we're going to cover. We'll keep it at a high level, not get too technical, just to cover these things to ensure the success of implementations that we've done in the past. So initially, to get started, we have what we refer to as the requirements phase. And here, at high level, we're going to do our use case requirements for data modeling, which is very important, security and encryption requirements, service level agreements, SLAs, operational requirements to allow us to monitor and manage the system, and then the searching and analytics requirements as well. Some of the key points here is, and I think Brian said this earlier, get the data model right is going to be key to our success here, and leverage whatever you can. So if there's an existing database where you can get access to the query logs, go and do that. That's going to help you define your data model. You want to be able to define specific create, read, update, and delete requirements. Those are essential for the requirements phase. And then also security is important, both from an authentication perspective and an authorization perspective. And you can see the areas that we cover there. Encryption, we have the client application to DataStax, kind of the cluster to the cluster, and then the node to node, which is the intercluster encryption. SLAs are must-have and are highly recommended, even if you just define them for your own project. The lack of SLAs has led to a lot of project failures, and this always comes up during our implementation process, and we work with the customer to help define those. We have to understand, too, we're building a mission-critical system, so we have to make sure we define the operational monitoring and the management of the system early on in the process, too, and to make sure we build to those requirements. And then, as we talked earlier, DataStax search, we're going to be defining our requirements here, but ultimately we need to determine the fields that will be searched on and returned in the searching process. And you can see some examples we give you as well. Data analytics has requirements as well. They're important to capture at this time. The key ones that we see out there that need to be incorporated are statistical algorithms, required data sources, the data movement and modifications, security and access, and then there's the other analytical requirements. And we just have to make sure we have enough detail to perform a good design. Step 2 is the design phase. And again, the data model leads off this list as well. Data access object, data movement design, operational design, search, and analytics design as well we're going to touch on. So here in the data model design needs to include Keyspace design, our replication strategy name, our table design, and you can see that the components within that that are necessary for us to put this design together. And then again, any relationship between tables needs to be noted here. And the joining is not technically feasible within DataStax, but as Brian mentioned his demonstration, how that can be overcome and accomplished. So again, we want to identify this stuff early in the design process and incorporate it here. When leveraging simple data access objects, we want to keep it simple to be successful. So we want to use the data access objects to encapsulate an abstract data manipulation logic. We want to keep this, current trends in the industry right now is an application development where the projects leverage framework to encapsulate and abstract and represent database components as application objects. We're doing that a little bit differently. And then designing the application DataStax as much as possible up front will help in the overall application development and functionality component. And then the last piece is the data movement design, the batch, real-time data integration between the systems, ETL, change data capture, data pipelines. These are all the essential things in the design phase for data movement. In our operational design, we want to do as much tooling and techniques as possible. So we want to know how to deploy new nodes, configure and upgrade nodes in the cluster. We want to be able to back up and restore operations. We want to know how to do cluster monitoring, op center use, repairs, alerting, disaster management processes. We want to have all those things in place. And KPI highly recommends putting a playbook in place to manage the operational design process. Here's some of the search design stuff we talked about earlier. Searchable terms, returned items, tokenizers, filters, the multi-document search terms. These are all things we identify and incorporate into our design phase. And then you can see the analytics component as well. We do a design phase for analytics this early in the process. Step 3 is our implementation phase. We're going to cover our infrastructure, deployment and configuration management, and then software components which include both the data model and the application that's been built to do this, and then our unit testing of the components. When you're doing application development, based on your organization, you can use an agile or waterfall methodology. All work well with this process here. We want to cover the deployment and configuration of the management mechanisms. So it's key in a distributed system like this is to automate as much as possible. So try to leverage Ops Center, Docker, Vagrant, Chef, Puppet, all those type of components. And then obviously in unit testing, more complex with a distributed system compared to a single node system. Be prepared for that. We're going to be looking for specific defects such as race conditions. Those can only be observed when we at production scale or somewhat a scale of the actual system. So we always recommend unit testing should be executed over a small cluster, but that contains more than a single node. And then there's other things that you can use to automate some of your testing and launching things. Those are always recommended as well. Our step 4 is the pre-production testing phase, and basic stuff here: defect tracking, tools you can use to do that stuff, and our operational readiness checklist. That is key to deploying an application like this. It's critical to enable the project team to identify actual issues prior to going to production at scale. In financial services, it's very common where the testing environment we're using is an exact clone of the production environment. Just for that reason alone, they want to identify as much upfront as possible. We recommend a 2-week minimal period for running your application at that production scale to look for all these errors and issues prior to going live. And it may take several iterations of your configuration, some code changes, and other things before you are able to do the full execution. Here's a good example of an operational readiness checklist, and you can kind of bullet through these. Most people you'd be expecting this type of stuff. These are things you need to be ready to do and execute prior to going to production. That way, when you're in production, you feel comfortable doing it and everything's in place to execute on that. Our last up here is the scale and enhancements. And these are to highlight the normal operational mode of an application built on DataStax Enterprise. So we're always looking for how do we scale this and how can we enhance this, whether it's tuning, performance, more features, more functions. These are the things that we're always looking for in this phase here. And then you always have to prepare for all the eventualities. Things are going to happen. And you can address this by adding nodes to expand capacity to the system when it's needed. These are all options you have with the DSE product and capabilities that you have to plan to take advantage of as you grow. And also the final thing is to scale with DataStax. The enterprise solution is a nice to have, and it's what the product's for. That's what it's known for, and its dominance out there in the field today. These are just some reference architecture examples we put in place. Brian gave some great examples. These are some other ones to look at that are commonly used in the field today. Here's another one that's a cloud-based one. A lot of organizations that are global set up these kind of clusters, west, east, and then EMEA to do various times of real-time analytics and searching that are out there available to you. To quickly wrap up here, the key things we want to push today is one of the things we've been very successful with and a lot of customers appreciate is scheduling a lunch and learn. Reach out to us. Let us know you're interested. What we do is a KPI will team up with DataStax. We'll come out to your location, and it's purely an educational 2-hour session based on your knowledge and what experience you have with Cassandra. It can be introduction all the way up to some more advanced data modeling or performance tuning if necessary. So that's something we're more than happy to do at no charge, and we've got quite a following doing that type of stuff at many different organizations, and typically it's geared towards architects, developers, people looking to understand how they can take advantage of the Cassandra product. And the other one is a DataStax assessment call. We can quickly get on the call with you, answer any questions you may have, do an assessment of maybe your use case that you're considering, or make some changes to something you're currently doing today. My contact information is included here. Feel free to reach out to me at any time, and we'll get back to you promptly. The other thing I want to remind everybody of is the Cassandra Summit. It's in September. KPI will be in booth 111. Should be easy to find.